g'day and welcome to the channel. In today's video, I want to share with you some amazing features of the Canon R5 Mark II, which you might not be aware of and might make your life in the field a little bit easier. I'm going to showcase how these features work and of course share some wonderful photos that I've taken in the field. The first feature is one that I really enjoyed on the Sony A9 Mark III. What is it? It's a speed boost button. It's the ability to change your frame rate instantly by depressing a button. What do I mean? Well, if we shoot in H mode on the Canon R5II and maybe we set it at 15 frames per second, say we want 30 frames per second. Traditionally, we'd have to change the drive mode from H to H+, and then we'd be shooting in 30 frames per second. But the R5II actually allows you to simply depress a button and go from 15 to 30 frames per second instantly. I'll share with you exactly how we do that. So the button I believe works best for this is the depth of field preview button on the front of the camera. It means that I can have my index finger on the shutter, my back button on the focus, and then I can depress it with my third finger to initiate the speed boost feature. So let's set it up now. Just a quick tip, if you're not aware, you can scroll through those top menus just by using the control dial on the top of the camera. So we get to the green menu, it says customize buttons for shooting. We need to go into that. Then we need to go down to the depth of field preview button and we need to hit set on that. And then we need to scroll down until we find this feature called Switch ES Continuous Shooting Modes. Now this is definitely hidden in the menu and it's not very well described. It probably should say speed boost or something like that. Now if we hit info, it now says high speed continuous. That's the mode that we want to initiate when we depress the button. So I just push H+, and now that is initiated on the camera. It means that when we depress that button, we will go to H+. All right, so we can see that I am in H mode, and we can see what speed that is just by going into the menu. If we go to the orange menu and we go to submenu 3, it says continuous shooting speed. If we go into that, that's where we set H+, H, etc. At the moment, I've got high speed set to 15 and I've got high speed continuous set to 30. So at the moment, my default would be 15 frames per second. And we can see that that's 15 frames per second. Let's say I want some sort of action. I simply depress that front button. You can see how the camera goes from H to H+ just by holding down that button, and listen to the frame rate change. So that's pretty cool. That's a really cool ability that when you're in the field and you've got a bit of action happening and you just want that 30 frames per second, just depress that button and away you go. Depress it, let it go, and you go straight back to 15 frames per second. I absolutely love this feature. Highly encourage you to give it a go. Now I've got to give credit to Ron at Whistling Wings. I believe he was the first one to pick this up. I definitely wasn't aware of this till quite recently, and that's why I'm sharing it with you. So thanks, Ron. It's just a really cool feature that's obviously buried away. And I did use this in the field recently. I was shooting some crakes, walking through the grass, but as soon as it had a really good pose, I just depressed that front button. We got 30 frames per second, hammered away, and we managed to get this shot, which I'm very, very happy with. So the second feature I want to share with you is a feature that I've really enjoyed using, I think, on Nikon and maybe Panasonic, and that is the ability to register a focus distance and then recall to that using the camera by pushing a button. What do I mean by that? How often have you actually locked on the background when using your camera? It seems to happen all the time and it's very annoying. How do we then pull the focus back to the subject? At the moment, or how we've traditionally done it on Canon, is we've either used the manual focus ring to pull focus, or we've actually focused at the ground, or we've just madly tried to focus on something, and it's very annoying. Wouldn't it be better if there was a quick and simple way that we could just pull focus straight back to us and then start again? That is what the R5II now has. How do we set that up? Well, first, we need to set a focus distance that the camera is going to come back to, and then we need to push a button to pull it back to that focus. So you will need two buttons on your camera, and this is where I'm running into some issues with the R5 Mark II. I'm simply running out of buttons to assign, but you can set it up however you want. If you've got a lens with a custom button, I highly recommend doing that. So let's jump into the menu and assign setting the focus distance to a button. So we jump into the menu, we then go to the green menu, submenu 1, customize buttons for shooting. Now you can set this up wherever you want. For me, I think the easiest way is if you go to the lens, set it up on the lens. So if we go into the lens, we need to find our way to where it says register focus preset. This means if we push the button, it will register whatever focus distance we're currently at. So set that up on a button of your choosing, and then we need to set a button to actually recall to that. So again, choose a button that you want to use. I'm definitely running out of them. I've just got it set up on the set button, but again, set it up on whatever you want. So we come into here, recall focus. So we need one button to set it and one button to recall it. Now that we've got those two buttons set up, we can now have a look. So let's say that we were focused on the subject, whatever it might be, a perch, whatever it is, and we want to set that focus distance. All we need to do is to press the button, and you can see it pops up saying registered focus preset. So now if we ever accidentally focus on the background, if I want to pull focus back, I simply push the button and it racks focus back. This is incredible, and it's very, very useful. If you're in the field, and one example is I was shooting some bees on a grass tree. The focus, for whatever reason, would jump to the background, and I just wanted to quickly pull the focus back. I can just use the system. I can set the registered focus distance on the grass tree. If I ever go to the background, simply push one button, pulls focus back. So you can imagine yourself how you could use this in the field. If you're in a hide and you've got a perch set up and you've got birds landing on that perch, register that focus distance. If your camera ever goes to the background or gets lost, push a button, straight back. Now let's say that you wander around and walk around and you don't really want to be setting a distance every time you're shooting. You could just set a distance at say 5 meters, something like that. And if the camera ever goes to the background, just push the button, it will pull focus back, which will bring your subject back into focus, and then you can use eye tracking or start your focus again. So it's just a tool that enables you to pull focus back, and it's brilliant, and I'm definitely using it, and I highly suggest you give this one a go as well. And I just want to share a photo that I did take on this grass tree when I was trying to photograph these bees. Well, it was backlit. Surprisingly, the autofocus has worked when the bees was just hovering there, and we've managed to capture this shot, which I absolutely love. The autofocus has actually worked in this scenario. We've managed to pull focus back whenever we lost it. The camera just worked perfectly here, enabling this wonderful photo. So one thing I've definitely noticed with the R5 Mark II is it has some additional autofocus modes over the Canon R5. The main one being spot with tracking. Now we have a number of different AF modes that we can use, and it gets very confusing. We can actually use triple back button focus on this camera. You're thinking, why would I want to use that? Traditionally, I've used dual back button focus. That is, I had spot or traditional spot with no tracking and eye tracking. Those were the two autofocus modes that I had. However, let's say we now want spot with tracking, eye tracking, and spot without tracking. How do we do that? Traditionally, we would just go through the different focus modes. We'd push a button and select the one that we want, but we can actually set up 3 individual different types of autofocus on the back of the Canon camera. So you can quickly just choose whichever one suits you best. All right, so what I might do is just demonstrate this to you quickly. So at the moment, this camera defaulted is our spot with tracking. So you can see that we've got our spot autofocus, and then you can see how it's detected the eye there. If I hold down AF on, it will start autofocusing on that eye, which is great. Now, if we want just traditional eye tracking, maybe you got bird in flight or something like that, I can just hold down the second button and we've just got eye tracking. We can move around and it'll just stick to the eye as we move around, which is pretty cool. Now, if we want just traditional spot without any tracking, let's say tracking's getting confused, you know, sometimes it just gets stuck on a branch or whatever, I can just hit the third button for traditional autofocus and we just focus wherever we need to using that third button. So I've got 3 different focus modes on the back of the camera. And again, if I wanted to use flexible zone, I could do that as well. So let's have a look at how we set up triple back button autofocus. So let's say that your default autofocus is going to be spot with tracking. How do we set that up? So we go into that pink menu, the AF menu, and we go to the number 1, submenu 1. It's got AF operation servo. We leave that. We got AF area. We come into here and we select spot AF, and then we've got whole area tracking servo AF on. Next we go to the submenu 2. We want to obviously have subject to detect as animals and eye detection set to auto. For me at the moment, I'm just using the auto AF case and I've got it set to locked on. So if we come into here, I've got it set to locked on -1. And again, you can change these and move these around, but those are our main autofocus settings. Now with that AF set up, we now need to assign that to a button on the back of the camera. We need to go to the green menu obviously submenu 1 to customize buttons. We come into here. Now to get back button focusing working, we need to disable focusing on the shutter button. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go into the shutter button, and we just need to have it as metering start. So I think as default it will say metering and AF start. This does your autofocus and metering, but we don't want autofocus on the shutter button, so we just set metering start. Enable that, and now we need to go down to our AF on button, and we come into here and we now set up the AF on button as metering and AF start. So we select that, and now when we try to autofocus, you can see we have the spot with tracking, and when we move that around it works. So that's our default autofocus mode, is spot with tracking. All right, so now we need to set up the second back button for just old traditional eye tracking. So we need to go into the menu, we need to go back to the green menu 1, customize buttons for shooting, go down to the star, and this is where we just set it to eye detection AF. So just select eye detection AF, and now our second button will just be traditional eye tracking. So that means you can just focus and move around, as you can see here. All right, so now we have a third back button. How do we set that up for our third mode? So we want spot without tracking. We go back into the menu and we go customize buttons for shooting again. Now we go down to the third back button, which is your AF point button. We click on that. We need to work our way down, and it can be a little bit hard to find, but it's this feature called Register Recall Shooting Function. And I've shared this before, and this is just a way to set up like a custom mode to a button. So if you're doing, most people I think traditionally use this for say bird and flight or something like that, but you can set this up purely for an autofocus mode. So if we come into here, you've got to hit info on your camera, detail set. When you open this up, most of these will be checked. So we want to uncheck all of these modes, because we just want to use what's currently on the camera, the existing exposure, etc. All we want to change is the actual autofocus mode. So if we go down to autofocus, we go over to here, AF area, and this is where we select our third option. And down here, this is new on the R5 Mark II, it says spot AF with no tracking. It's got that little lock symbol. So if we pick that, and we go all the way down to the bottom, AF operation, that needs to be on. So everything else is unchecked. The only two things that are checked is AF area and down the bottom, AF operation. And that's all we need to do. Do not hit register current settings, because then it won't work. That just takes your other autofocus settings. So we now hit menu and we go back out, and now we have our triple back button autofocus set up. So AF with spot, AF button is spot with tracking, the second button is traditional eye tracking, and our third button is spot without tracking. Bit of a mouthful, but you can see how useful that is. The beauty of this is you can set it up however you want. You can have which autofocus mode you prefer on the AF on button and the third button. So let's say, for example, that you prefer flexible zone as your default. So all we need to do is go into the menu, go to AF menu and AF operation. If we just select flexible zone AF1, select that, and now we go. We've now got the flexible zone that we can move around. You will track whatever is in that flexible zone. If you're not aware, you can change that flexible zone window or the size of that. To do that, you've actually got to go into the menu for selecting the AF zones. So just be aware that you will have to use the AF point selection to change the flexible zone size. I know this is very confusing, but you can see on the screen here, this is the option. This is the AF point selection. With AF point selection, you push it, and then you get this screen here, and it says, if we hit rate on the camera, we can now, using the scroll wheels, we can change the size of our flexible zone to whatever we want. All right, and once that's set, hit OK. And now when we're doing, you can see we have our flexible zone. The right button is just traditional, and then spot without tracking. And that is how we have triple back button autofocus. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. How do you have your autofocus set up? Which mode do you prefer? Which ones are you using? Are you using triple back button autofocus? Now, in use, I actually came across a red-bellied black snake. I was out with my mate. He spotted it. So I immediately walked up to the snake, got down nice and low, to try and improve my angle, initiated the autofocus, and managed to take this photo. Now, I would never have got this photo without this camera because I actually used pre-capture to capture that exact moment that the tongue has come out of the snake. So I missed it, but because I had pre-capture enabled, held down the shutter, we managed to get that exact moment that the tongue has come out, enabling us to get this shot. Very happy to get that. So I know many of you asked me about snakes. These ones aren't the deadliest snakes, so I wasn't too worried about it, and it just moved away, but I was happy to get an encounter with that one. So the next feature I want to talk about is the quickest way to turn pre-capture on and off. As I've gone over a few times now, this camera has pre-capture and it's incredible, but it's a bit painful to turn it on and off. There isn't a button that, like on Sony, that we can just push to turn it on and off, which is disappointing. So what's the quickest way to turn it off? Why would we even want to turn pre-capture off? I recently discovered that pre-capture actually takes 15 frames regardless of your FPS. So every time you engage pre-capture and you hit the shutter, it takes 15 photos. Even if you're in 5 frames per second, it's going to take 15 frames and then additional frames from that, which means you end up taking a lot of photos. So sometimes you don't need it. How do we currently do it? Well, we've got to go into the menu. So we need to navigate our way to the red menu, then submenu 6, go down to pre-continuous shooting and disable it or enable it. And to do that every time you want to turn it on and off is just painful, and it just takes way too long. So there is actually a quicker way to do it, and it's using a feature called My Menu. Now, all Canon cameras have this. If we scroll all the way to the right-hand side to the green menu, you come to the option where you've set up your own menu with the most used features, and you can register and set up the ones that you want there. All right, so we need to go into configure my menu, select items to register, and it should be called, and we need to scroll down to pre-continuous shooting. We need to select that. We want to add that. And now if we go back, we can see sort registered items. I would put pre-continuous shooting at the top. That's the one we're going to be using the most. And we can see in my menu now, I've got pre-continuous shooting at the top, enable and then disable, which is great. So it's in my menu. What you might not be aware is we can set the camera to default to my menu when we hit menu. So it'll go straight to your my menu when you hit the menu button on the camera. So all we need to do is go to the right where it says my menu management and we hit menu display. Down here it says display from my menu tab. So if we enable that, what's going to happen is when we go to the menu, it'll take us straight to my menu, and we can just quickly disable and then start shooting again. Hit the menu, enable, and start shooting again. So it's just a way for us to quickly get into my menu without having to go through all the other menus. And that's a very handy feature, and it's handy if you want to change other things as well. Now, if you don't want menu on the left-hand side, you could set a button on the right-hand side for the menu just to make it a bit quicker for you. You can set it up however you want. But that's how I currently can turn pre-capture on and off very, very quickly. All right, there is another way that you can switch between pre-capture on and pre-capture off, and that is using switching between custom modes. Now, it was suggested by my subscriber Noel, so thanks Noel. It definitely works, but a word of warning, it's very complicated to set up. It's probably outside the scope of this video, and I think it might be just a little bit too difficult for most people to use. But basically how it works is you set a custom mode with pre-capture on and a custom mode without pre-capture, and then you set up the camera to cycle through those two custom modes. And you can do that using the MFN button, and then there's a C mode inside the camera. And as you can see here, I'm currently in C1M, and I have to press the shutter. I've got pre-capture enabled. I push and I can cycle through to C mode 2, and I no longer have pre-capture. So I can just pre-capture, no pre-capture, just by pushing one button. And I know that looks really cool, and it is, but there's a few issues when it comes to exposure carrying over between the different modes. It disables some other modes. It's just very confusing, and I would only suggest looking this up if you're very confident. Maybe have a look online, but for me, I think it's just a little bit too complicated, and because I shoot predominantly in manual mode, I'll probably just use the menu to turn it off and on. But again, I'll try a lot of these things in the field to see which one suits. I highly suggest you do the same. That's the benefit and joy of these cameras, is we can set them up however we want. So before I end the video, I want to share with you a photo that I've just captured on the R5 Mark II, and it was actually of a Balin's crake. And I met up with a mate, they were feeding, I've laid down low, started focusing on the bird, and I could see that there were some really nice reflections in the water because it was very calm and very still. And this little bird's feeding, walking over logs, and just as it's peering down to feed, we got this incredible reflection which resulted in this shot, and I could not be happier. It's very sharp, the detail's excellent, and it's just one of my favorite photos I've taken. And again, this highlights why bird photography is just so amazing, and you just don't know what you're going to get. I never would have dreamed of the shot, but we got it. The camera enabled it. I'm very happy. And I did ask my subscribers for a caption to go with this photo, and here's quite a few of them on the left hand side which actually caught my attention and made me laugh. Hello from down under. That's very typical for me, being Australian, of course. Doppelganger, I thought of that. It's definitely a doppelganger of itself. Reflection off the rails, that's a good play on the term that this is a type of rail bird. A lot of the people reference this Greek mythology. Is it Narcissus? I'm not sure the correct pronunciation, but I just loved those comments and captions that you gave. So it was definitely a lot of fun. I'm having fun using all these features. I hope you found this video helpful, and good luck trying it. Let me know in the comments how you get on using these features and whether you've found additional features that people might benefit from. We've got a wonderful community in the comments section. I highly suggest you jump down and have a read. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to support the channel, consider becoming a member for the price of less than a cup of coffee. It directly supports me and helps me to make these videos, which I really do enjoy and really do appreciate. So until the next video, happy birding, take care, and see you later.